"So white people make children this way? Can I try too?" said the innocent Apache woman. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
The wind moved steady across the open land, not loud, just constant, carrying fine snow that settled on fence posts and dead grass. Morning light spread slow across the prairie near Dry Willow Settlement, a place most riders passed through only when they needed grain or supplies. Colt Mercer rode alone on a narrow trail beside the creek, his horse pushing warm breath into the cold air. He sat straight in the saddle, one hand on the reins, the other close to the rifle resting across his thigh. He had been out since first light, checking the line fences and looking for 2 missing cattle. Work kept him busy, and busy meant quiet inside his head. He had spent years around killing and loss, first as a scout during border trouble, then drifting from job to job until land and solitude felt safer than any town. The land did not lie. The land did not take unless it warned first. Out here, he knew what his hands were supposed to do each day. Feed the horse, cut wood, repair fences, survive winter. Simple rules. Rules that made sense after years of chaos. His face carried those years. Lines at the eyes from watching horizons. A scar along his jaw from a knife fight long ago. He did not speak much. There was no one to talk to most days, and talking had never eased anything in his life anyway. Actions did. Routine did. Ahead, the creek cut a dark path through frost. He slowed the horse, scanning the ground for hoof prints. That was when he noticed something unusual. Not tracks, not cattle. Something still near the bend of the creek, half hidden by a fallen branch. His pulse lifted, not with panic but alertness. Out here, something on the ground meant trouble or tragedy. Often both. He guided the horse closer and stopped. A shape lay near the edge of the frozen water. Human. He swung his leg over the saddle and stepped down. His boots sank slightly into snow and wet dirt. Every step felt slower than normal because there had been times, years back, when walking toward a stranger on the ground ended in gunfire. He felt that memory tighten in his chest now. But he kept moving. When he reached her, he knelt. A woman. Young. Apache. Her hair was dark and messy, hanging in strands across her face. The skin along her cheek was scraped, and a thin cut dried near her jaw. Frost clung to her lashes. She was breathing, but only just. Her dress was torn at the shoulder and side, beads missing and leather dirty, as if she had crawled far before collapsing. Her arm trembled once, weak like someone fighting to wake up, but failing. Ayanna did not know this land well. She had not planned to cross through settler ground alone, but the soldiers who scattered her people gave her no choice. She had been running for days, drinking from creeks, eating roots, pushing herself through cold that chewed into bone. Fear had driven her at first. Fear had kept her moving even after her legs shook too much to stand. She had told herself she would reach a place where no one hunted her. But her body had given out before she found that place. Now, waking halfway, she saw only a shape above her. A man, white, coat heavy, hat pulled low. She wanted to react, to reach for strength, to get up, but there was none left. Her voice broke into a faint whisper that even she couldn't understand. Panic lived somewhere inside her still, buried under exhaustion. She did not know if this man would help or harm. That uncertainty made her chest tighten, but she could not run anymore. Colt noticed her eyes, trying to find him, even though she looked half asleep. He felt a familiar weight inside his chest. He had seen people in this state before. Soldiers abandoned after shots fired. Town drifters left to freeze after a fight. Refugees fleeing from the army's pushes west. People who had seen too much and trusted nothing. The look was always the same. Fear first, then resignation, then silence. He did not waste time thinking. Winter would kill her faster than any bullet now. His coat brushed against her as he lifted her carefully, supporting her head and body with practiced strength. She felt light, too light, like hunger had taken more from her than she realized. He placed her over his saddle and mounted behind her, keeping one arm around her so she did not slip. She made a faint sound, not protest, just a tired gasp. He spoke only once, voice calm and low. "I've got you. Don't fight. You're all right." He did not know if she understood, but she stopped trying to move. The ride back to his cabin took minutes, but felt heavy. Her breathing stayed shallow. Once she shivered sharply, and his arm tightened around her without thinking. He did not know her story, but he did not need to yet. Right now, survival was the only thing that mattered. The cabin came in a view tucked between bare cottonwoods. Smoke drifted from the chimney. Colt dismounted and lifted her again, feeling heat return to his own face as he hurried inside, boots striking wood. The warmth hit her skin, and she made a soft noise. Relief or pain? He couldn't tell. He set her on his bed. She blinked slowly, trying to stay awake, trying to understand, but exhaustion trapped her downward. He wrapped a wool blanket around her, tucking it near her neck, then added another. Her fingers curled weakly into the fabric, as if she wanted to hold on to it. He moved fast. Water heated on the stove. Broth poured into a tin cup. His hand worked steady, but his chest felt tight. Not fear, responsibility. Someone was in his care now. And if soldiers had chased her, danger would follow. The thought flashed in his mind and stayed there. He checked the door bolt without meaning to, then returned to her. "Drink slow," he said, holding the cup to her lips. She tried. Her hands shook. He steadied them. The broth touched her mouth, and she swallowed, breath trembling. Her throat worked with effort. She did not look away from him now. She was watching, measuring him, trying to understand if she was safe. He saw it. He felt the pressure of it. Trust was not easy where she came from. It had not been easy where he came from either. When she finished, he set the cup down and sat in the wooden chair by the bed. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. Name, tribe, reason, those could wait. First she needed warmth, water, food, quiet. He took a slow breath, shoulders lowering slightly, tension easing just enough to feel human again. She whispered once more, voice raw like scraped earth. The sound might have been her name. He stored it silently. He rested his rifle beside him, eyes fixed on the fire. Wind pressed against the cabin walls outside, but inside there was heat, breath, and a fragile start of safety. Colt Mercer wasn't a rescuer by nature. He didn't look for people to save, but he understood suffering when he saw it. And the woman lying in his bed was someone who had refused to die even when the land itself tried to finish her. He respected that. He spoke again, quieter this time. "You're safe here. Rest." Her eyes closed, but he knew she heard. Outside, the world stayed wide, empty, and dangerous. Inside, something changed in the quiet space between two strangers who had survived too much to trust easily. She slept. He watched the window, and the first line of their story settled into the cold morning, slow and real. Light pushed through the cabin window slow, pale and cold, touching the boards, the table, the tin coffee pot on the stove. Colt had slept only in short stretches in the chair beside the bed. Every time wind brushed the walls, he opened his eyes. Habit. Years of living alone had trained him to hear every sound, and now there was someone else breathing inside his space. That changed things. It made him alert in a way that felt both necessary and heavy. He looked toward her. The Apache woman had shifted in sleep, her dark hair loose now across the pillow, blanket pulled near her chin. Her breathing sounded steadier. Color had returned to her cheeks. Not much, but enough to show she wasn't at the edge anymore. He watched her chest rise and fall once, twice, feeling something settle inside him. Relief. He had carried wounded men away from battle once, and he knew the look of those who wouldn't last. She had fought to live. That meant something. He stood, stretching quiet so the floor wouldn't creak more than it had to, then stoked the stove, added water to the pot, and set beans to warm from last night. The smell of coffee filled the cabin. Outside, nothing moved except thin snow rolling along the ground. He walked to the door, opened it just a little, scanning the open land. No tracks near the cabin except his own and the horses. No movement along the tree line. It didn't mean danger wouldn't come. Soldiers rode patrols out here sometimes, hunting strays, hunting survivors. But for now it was quiet. A question tugged at him. Who chased her? How close were they? He didn't know her name, her tribe, what happened to her people. He hadn't asked, but before long, he would need answers. Not for curiosity, for safety. A man alone could vanish if trouble arrived. A woman running from soldiers could bring attention, and he needed to be sure he wasn't walking blind into a fight he didn't start. He closed the door and turned just as she stirred, her eyes opening slow, cautious. She looked around first, breathing fast for a moment, as if expecting to find ropes or weapons or strangers. Then she saw him. Her shoulders eased a little, though her gaze stayed sharp with memory and caution. She tried to sit. He stepped closer, lifting a hand slightly. Slow. You're weak still. She hesitated, weighing whether she should accept help from him. Still, she sat up, holding the blanket tight at her chest. Her voice came rough, quiet, each word small like she was testing her throat. You brought me here. Yes. You did not leave me. No. Her eyes softened, confusion mixing with gratitude. She had expected abandonment. Most out here did not risk trouble for someone they didn't know, especially someone like her. She dipped her head briefly, not a bow, more like she needed a breath to steady herself. Her hair fell forward, long and uncombed, strands resting against her collarbone. Colt tried not to stare, not at her face, not at the curve of her neck where her torn dress left bare skin. Not from impropriety, but respect. He poured a small cup of coffee and handed it to her. She held it with both hands, trembling from weakness more than cold. She sniffed it first, unsure, then sipped. The warmth eased some tension from her shoulders. He set bread and beans on the table and slid them closer. She looked at the food like she needed permission. He nodded once. Eat. She began slowly, chewing like she had forgotten what it felt like to taste something warm. He saw hunger in her eyes, but she didn't rush. Pride stayed in her movements. She would not devour food like someone desperate in front of a stranger. She ate with control, dignity. He respected that, too. After a quiet moment, she spoke again, voice barely above a breath. My name, Ayanna. He nodded once, taking the name into memory. Colt, he said. She repeated it under her breath, shaping the sound carefully. Her gaze studied him now, not in fear, but in quiet curiosity. Scars on his jaw, hollow, tired eyes. The way he stood like he expected trouble to knock on the door at any time. She could sense something familiar in him. A person who knew loss. That recognition created a thread between them even before either understood it. Ayanna pulled the blanket around her shoulders and looked toward the window, wary. They're still out there, she whispered. He didn't pretend not to know who she meant. Soldiers? Her face tightened, fear slipping through before she could hide it. Yes. How many? Many. They chase my people. We run. Some fall. Some hide. I run too long. Body finish before feet finish. Colt listened, jaw tight. He didn't pry deeper yet. Pain lived in her voice, and she wasn't ready to speak it fully. But he needed one thing clarified. Anyone see where you came? Any track to follow? She thought carefully, eyes narrowing in memory. I crossed ridge before night. Follow creek at dark. I fall there. She pointed the direction she had come from, her fingers weak but steady. I think no man see. He nodded slowly. It meant danger was not immediate, but not gone. Soldiers did not give up easily. And if they were sweeping the valley, sooner or later they might ride near his land. Ayanna looked at him again, reading the quiet concern in his face. She lowered her voice. You help me. You save me. I do not wish trouble on your house. I decide trouble when it comes, Colt said, tone firm but not harsh. You rest. Strength first. Talking can wait. She stared at him a long moment, searching for something. Trust. Intention. Threat. Whatever she found made her shoulders drop slightly, relief loosening her breath. She leaned back against the bed frame, still holding the blanket tight, still watching the door like someone who had spent too long expecting footsteps. Colt turned toward the stove, stirring the beans again, even though they didn't need stirring. He needed something for his hands to do. Saving someone meant responsibility. Responsibility meant the past creeping up again. He had sworn off getting involved in other people's battles. Yet here he stood, He had taken her in. He could undo that now. A part of him didn't want to. Outside, the wind continued moving across open land, steady and cold. Inside, warmth built slow between two strangers, not through words but through survival and the quiet understanding that neither had chosen this world, yet both were fighting to stay inside it. Ayana finished her food and set her cup down gently. She didn't ask to go. She didn't ask anything. She simply lifted her eyes to him and spoke in a voice that carried tired truth. I am here. I do not run anymore. Colt nodded once, steady, a decision forming firm inside him. Then this is where you stay. Her breath caught, just a little surprise flickering in her expression. For the first time since she arrived, a trace of safety touched her eyes. They did not smile. That wasn't who they were. Not yet. But the cabin felt less empty than it had yesterday, and both felt it in the silence that followed. Morning settled slowly in the cabin, turning the frost on the window into thin trails of water. Ayana sat propped against a pillow, her blanket wrapped close, eyes following Colt as he moved around the room. She looked stronger than yesterday, but still fragile, like standing too fast would knock her down again. He noticed every small thing, the steadier breath, the focus returning to her eyes, the way she held herself upright out of stubborn pride rather than strength. He ladled broth into a tin bowl and slid it toward her. She accepted it without protest this time, hands still trembling but steadier than the night before. She ate quiet, keeping her gaze low, but occasionally she glanced at him as if checking whether she was imposing. Cole caught one look and answered before she spoke. You're not in the way, he said. Ayana paused, spoon held halfway to her lips. She nodded once, slow. His reassurance mattered more than she would admit. Outside, wind shifted direction, rattling the loose shutter. Colt stepped to the window and checked the land again, eyes scanning the tree line, open field, and ridge. Nothing moved except wind bending the dry brush. But silence didn't bring comfort. This region had been tense for months. Soldiers growing restless, settlers uneasy, rumors of raiding bands turning into justification for patrols and punishment even when no proof existed. He knew why Ayana was here, not just running for life, but running from a world twisted by fear and power. And though he had kept himself separate from it, he understood how fast that world reached even the quietest land. She finished eating and set the bowl down carefully. You look much, she said, searching for the right word in English. Worried. Watchful, he corrected. She nodded, absorbing the meaning. Colt turned toward her fully, leaning a hand on the table. There were questions he had to ask now. When you left your people, were you alone? Her jaw tightened. I left with 3 families. Mothers, children, old ones. She swallowed. Soldiers find tracks. We run. I hear guns. I run more. I not see them again. Her eyes lowered, pain closing her throat for a moment. I think some live. I hope. Her fingers curled against the blanket. She took a shaky breath. I walk many days. Sleep little. Eat less. The snow, it takes strength. Colt listened without shifting his expression, but the muscles along his jaw clenched faintly. That was war talk without the word war. He had seen versions of it from both sides. People fleeing camps, troops tracking them. It always ended bloody, and always left ghosts walking the land. Ayana looked toward the door, voice soft. I think maybe soldiers not follow, but fears stay even when feet stop. He understood. Fear did not leave fast. He still woke sometimes with his hand reaching for a gun before his eyes opened. She studied him in return. Why you alone here? Many men live near town. You live far. It was fair. She had shared her reason. Now he owed an answer. He rubbed the back of his neck, thinking how to shape the truth without drowning her in it. Worked with scouts during the fighting, he said. Saw too much. Lost men I knew. Lost ones I didn't. He looked toward the stove, voice steady but low. When it ended, I wanted quiet. Wanted land that didn't ask questions every time I breathed. So I stayed out here. Ayana listened with the same attentive stillness she used when danger approached, but this time it was empathy, not fear. Quiet can save, she murmured. It can. She rested her back against the bed frame again, gathering her hair into a loose tie with shaking fingers. But quiet, also lonely. He didn't respond right away. He didn't deny it either. She saw that answer in his silence and gave a small nod like she understood more than he wished she did. He cleared his throat once. Once you have strength, there's clothes in that trunk. Warmer than what you have. She looked down at the torn dress, at the worn leather, the missing beads. I fix this later, she said stubbornly. I not leave things broken. He respected that. First rest, then sewing. She breathed out slowly, as if relieved he didn't expect her to sit useless. Pride mattered to her. Work meant dignity. He wouldn't strip that from her. He stepped outside to check the horse, but kept the door cracked. He hauled hay from the shed, checked the water trough, then walked the fence line closest to the house. Footprints from yesterday still lay fresh. No new prints. No drag marks. No horse signs. His mind ran through what-ifs anyway. Snow could hide prints. Soldiers could approach from the ridge. Scouts could watch from brush. He lifted his rifle and sighted across the field, scanning the far rise. Nothing. He lowered it but didn't relax. A man did not survive years of conflict by trusting quiet mornings. Inside, Ayanna pushed herself to stand, gripping the bed frame until her legs steadied. She walked slow to the water basin and splashed her face, feeling life return in small pieces. In her tribe, she would never show weakness this long. Here she had no choice, but she would not stay fragile forever. That promise settled inside her like fire. When Colt re-entered, she turned, still holding the blanket. I help, she insisted. Not today. She frowned, frustration flickering. I do not hide like scared rabbit. I stay and work. I didn't say hide. I said rest. Their eyes locked, neither backing away from their stance, until her breath eased and she gave the smallest nod. Not surrender. A truce. He poured more coffee, set a cup near her. She accepted it, and they sat in the quiet together, not speaking, not needing to yet. Outside, the world stayed unpredictable, but inside the cabin something steady began to take shape. Not trust fully, not yet, but recognition. Two people who carried scars from different wars yet understood the same truths: survival, dignity, and the slow work of rebuilding strength. Ayanna wrapped the blanket tighter and took a sip. When soldiers come again, she said softly, I not run alone this time. Colt didn't answer with words. He didn't have to. His stillness, his watchful eyes, his rifle leaning ready near the door. Those were his answer. They were not running anymore. By midday, the cabin carried the warmth of steady fire and the quiet rhythm of two people trying to regain normal life in a world that hadn't been normal for a long time. Snow fell thin but constant outside, dusting the porch rails and making the land look flat and cold as far as the eye could see. Colt pulled on his coat and hat as he headed toward the door. Ayanna watched him from the bed, her hands tucked inside the blanket. Brow tight with worry, she didn't speak yet. You're going out, she said quietly. Just around the land. Checking fence. Checking tracks. He adjusted his hat. Won't go far. She studied him and the rifle leaning near the door, her gaze sharp like she still expected danger at every breath. You think soldiers come? I think they could. His answer wasn't meant to scare her. Just truth. A man who had seen the worst didn't like surprises. She considered that, then nodded once. Not panicked, just accepting reality. I do not want you fight for me, she murmured. Not lose life for me. Colt held her eyes a second. I don't plan to lose anything. A simple, steady answer, but the kind that held iron under it. He stepped outside, boots sinking slightly into soft snow. The air bit at his skin, the sky wide and pale above him. The land stretched quiet, but his eyes moved nonstop. Ridge, creek bend, tree lean. The habit of a man who spent too many years expecting trouble. He checked the fence, tugging loose wire tight, boots crunching over frost. As he worked, a thought stayed with him. Why'd he brought her in? Survival instinct would have said to ride past, leave trouble where it fell. But something in her eyes yesterday, fear threaded with pride, struck him. He knew what it felt like when a person kept going, not because they were strong, but because giving up wasn't allowed. He recognized that in her. And maybe, deep down, he'd been tired of quiet that felt like the world forgot he existed. He didn't say that aloud, even in his own head. Men like him didn't talk feelings. They lived through them. At the creek bank, he crouched, brushing snow aside. No new tracks. No sign of riders. Just wind cutting across the water surface. He exhaled slow, not relieved, just informed. Quiet today didn't promise quiet tomorrow. He returned to the cabin and found Ayanna standing, using the wall for balance. The blanket was wrapped around her, but she was dressed underneath in one of his spare shirts, sleeves rolled clumsily to her wrists, hem reaching just above her knees. She'd found it in the trunk. It hung loose, but she looked warmer and stubborn. She held a small sewing kit she must have found, needle already threaded. "I fixed dress," she announced, steady but tired. "You should be lying down. I have body. I stand." There was pride there, determination, a fight to reclaim control. He didn't argue further. He just moved toward the stove. "Soup's warm. You eat again." She looked down at the sewing bundle like she didn't want to stop. Then she set it aside. "I eat," she agreed, softer, accepting rest, not because she was weak, but because she chose to trust his judgment. That choice mattered more than she realized. They sat at the small table. Ayanna ate spoonfuls slow but steady, shoulders relaxing slightly with each warm swallow. Colt drank coffee, watching her from the corner of his eye. Her face still held fear around the edges, not for him now, but for what might come. He understood that. Fear didn't disappear in one night. After a while she spoke. "You do not wear uniform now." "No." "You left Army." "Yes." "Why?" Her voice was gentle, curious, not challenging. He rested his coffee down, jaw tight at memory. "Saw things didn't sit right. Orders I couldn't carry anymore." He didn't elaborate, but the heaviness in his voice filled the space. Ayanna studied him. "You carry shame," she said quietly, not judging, simply noticing. He didn't deny it. "Some things don't leave a man." She nodded with understanding deeper than words. "Some things follow always." He glanced at her. "What did soldiers want with your people?" She took a slow breath. "Land. Always land. We move because white men say we must. We say no. They say run or die. We run. They chase." Her eyes lowered. "I lose everything but my breath." He let silence hold that truth. He had known it already, heard stories whispered, even among scouts, but hearing her say it stripped it bare. Suddenly, hoofbeats cracked through the quiet outside, light but sharp on frozen ground. Ayanna stiffened instantly, hand gripping the table. Colt rose fast, grabbing his rifle and stepping toward the window. He peered out, jaw clenched. A single rider approached from the road, coat thick, hat low, horse dark against the snow. Not soldier uniform. Local rancher, maybe, or town deputy, or trouble wearing civilian colors. Colt motioned Ayanna toward the back corner. "Stay out of sight." She moved without argument, clutching the blanket around herself, eyes alert and breathing tight, but not panicked, like someone who'd hidden before and knew every breath mattered. The rider slowed at the cabin gate. Colt opened the door, but left his rifle in hand. Not pointing, just visible. "Morning," the man called, breath visible in the cold. His voice had a flat calm to it. "Heard rumor soldiers been sweeping north. Figured you'd want a word." Colt nodded once, but didn't soften his stance. "Appreciate the warning." The rider glanced toward the cabin windows. Not enough to suspect, just natural curiosity. Colt stepped outside far enough to block his view. "Everything all right out here?" the man asked. "Quiet enough." The rider scratched his jaw, then tugged his reins. "If you see tracks or smoke, ride south. Folks gathering in case trouble spreads." "Noted." The rider tipped his hat and turned back down the road. Colt stood still until the sound of hooves faded. Then he shut the door, locking it by habit, breath slow but heavy. Ayanna stepped forward from the shadows, fear raw in her eyes. "They look. They hear. They find." "He didn't see you," Colt said, voice steady. "And he won't come back today." "But tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow's not here yet." They looked at each other, the truth between them clear. Safety was temporary, but they were no longer facing it alone. Ayanna sat down again, shaking slightly but holding her head high. Colt set the rifle back against the wall, closer than before. Outside, snow kept falling, slow and quiet. Inside, two people sat in silence that wasn't empty anymore, just tight, real, and ready for whatever came next. The day settled into a heavy quiet after the rider left. Not fearful silence, but a kind where both minds stayed alert even while hands worked. Colt split wood by the shed with controlled swings, each strike steady, rhythm clean, breath showing in sharp white puffs. Ayanna sat near the table, stitching her dress with slow, careful movements, thread passing through torn leather, fingers still trembling sometimes, but growing steadier each minute. She worked like she was stitching more than cloth, stitching back dignity, control, self. Every so often she glanced toward the door, listening, making sure hoofbeats didn't return. Colt noticed each time. He understood the habit. The body doesn't relax just because danger stepped away once. Inside the cabin, warmth built thick. Smoke from the stove curled up through the chimney, carrying the smell of burning oak. The pot on the stove bubbled low, filling the room with scent of stew, rabbit he'd trapped 2 days before, mixed with onion and dried herbs. Hunger made itself known in both of them, not desperate, but real. When Cole came back inside, snow dusted his shoulders and hair. He shook it off near the door. Ayanna looked up, eyes following him as if checking his face for signs of trouble. He hung his coat, set the axe aside, and brushed cold from his hands. She went back to her sewing, but Colt could tell she'd only moved her eyes, not her awareness. She was learning his land, learning his routine, matching it to her survival instinct. "You did good finishing that seam," he said, noticing her progress. She paused, surprised by the compliment. A small breath escaped her chest, not quite a smile, but close to relief. "I sew since girl," she said quietly. "Clothes, bags, moccasins. Work makes spirit strong." Colt nodded. "Work keeps a mind steady." She looked at him differently then, like he had spoken a truth she recognized but rarely heard from white men. It made her settle a little deeper into her seat. She finished tying off a thread, smoothed the repaired leather, and set the dress aside. Her body sagged slightly from exertion. Days of starvation didn't vanish just because warmth returned. Colt noticed the fatigue creeping back across her expression. "You need to rest again," he said. "I rest enough." "Too much rest makes body forget strength." "Stand up a minute then," he answered calmly. "See if your legs hold." Ayanna hesitated, then pushed herself up. She stood straight at first, blanket still around her shoulders. Then weakness touched her knees, and she grabbed the table. Colt stepped forward, hand near but not touching unless she needed it. She appreciated it. Pride softened enough for honesty. "Not strong yet," she admitted quietly. "You will be," Colt replied. "Takes time." She lowered herself into the chair again, slowly. "Time is gift. Many do not have long time." His jaw tightened slightly. He didn't need to ask who she meant. Family. Friends. The ones lost on the run. She stared down at her hands for a moment, fingers curling around the blanket edge. He changed the subject gently. "You need boots eventually. Snow's not easing up." Ayanna looked down at her bare feet tucked under the blanket. "I will make soft ones from hide," she said. "When you trap again, you know how to tan hide?" She lifted her chin. "My people live with land. We make what we need. You think we walk barefoot in snow forever?" He shook his head, not insulted, respectful. "No, I think you know more than most around here." She took that in, surprised again, as if kindness from him felt unfamiliar, but steady. While the stew finished cooking, Colt stepped outside again to bring him more wood. Ayanna used that moment to stand again, trying her strength quietly, pushing past weakness. She walked toward the doorway, steadying herself with the wall. When Colt returned carrying logs, she nearly ran into him. Her eyes widened, instinct bracing like she'd been caught, doing something she shouldn't. He paused, hands full of wood. Trying again. She lifted her chin, stubborn fire lit behind tired eyes. "I do not sit like baby bird waiting for food." "I didn't say you should," he answered, tone even, but strength returned slow. No shame in taking time. She hated the idea of appearing weak, but something in his voice made it easier to breathe. He wasn't pitying her, just checking she didn't fall face first onto the floor. After lunch, they sat quiet again. The cabin crackled with fire. Outside, wind eased. For a moment, peace felt real. But the world outside was too wild to trust long stretches of quiet. Colt sensed that truth. Ayanna did too. She looked up suddenly. "You have no woman," she said. Not rude, but curious, honest. "No," he replied. "No family here." "No." His answer held weight, but no bitterness. She studied him. "Why stay alone then? Land big, house empty, life heavy when only one person carry." He exhaled once, deep. "Some part of me thought I deserved quiet, earned it, or needed it. And now?" He didn't reply immediately. His eyes moved to her repaired dress, folded neatly on the bed, then to the stew pot, then back to her face, tired but stubborn, alive again. "Now the quiet feels different," he said finally. Ayanna held his gaze. Something unspoken passed between them. Not romance yet, not trust complete, but acknowledgement. They were no longer strangers surviving alone. They were survivors sharing ground, learning each other, rebuilding in the same small space. She leaned back, exhaustion finally settling heavy. Colt rose, checked the window again, then sat near the fire. She watched him once more before her eyes grew heavy. "You keep watch," she whispered. "I do. For me. For both of us." Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders eased. She slept again, this time without clutching the blanket like a shield. That trust did not escape Colt. He stayed seated, listening to the crackle of wood, the hum of wind against the walls, and the soft, steady breaths of someone who had chosen to rest under his roof. He rested his hand near the rifle, but didn't hold it. Just ready. Outside, the land waited quiet. Inside, two lives continued to knit together, not rushed, not forced, just naturally, through necessity, stubborn will, and something rising quiet like dawn over winter plains. Ayanna slept. Cole kept watch, neither of them alone anymore. By the next morning, the storm had passed. The land outside the cabin looked washed clean by cold, a wide stretch of pale ground under a sky that held faint sunlight, but no warmth. Smoke rose thin from the chimney, catching on a slow breeze. Inside, the cabin was quiet but alive, faint sounds of movement breaking the stillness. Ayanna sat at the table now, not in bed. She wore her repaired dress over Colt's shirt, making it fit better. Her hair was loosely braided, and though her posture showed weakness in her limbs, she held herself straight. Pride and will always came first for her. She watched the fire, rubbing her hands once as if testing how much strength had returned overnight. Colt finished tightening the straps on his boots. He had been outside earlier to check the barn, then returned with worry carved in small lines around his eyes, but he hadn't spoken it yet. Ayanna noticed. "You see something?" she asked quietly. "Tracks," he answered. "Horse. One rider. Passing along the ridge south side." She stiffened immediately, hand tightening around her cup. "Soldier. Didn't see uniform. But stranger riding near private land in winter means something." He paused. Could be nothing. Could be scout. That truth settled heavy between them. Ayanna looked down for a moment. "They searched still," she murmured. Colt didn't answer. He strapped his holster, checked his revolver, then set the rifle near the door. He moved without rush, but with purpose. The kind of movements men made when preparing for possibilities, not panic. Ayanna stood slowly. She managed without the wall this time, though she kept the table nearby. "I not hide forever," she said, quiet but solid. "No one asked you to." Colt's voice wasn't soft, but it carried steadiness. "There's time for standing. Right now we need strength first." He poured her a mug of warm water with herbs. She accepted it, sniffed it, then drank. Something in her eyes eased. She wasn't used to care without price. She watched him, evaluating his intentions again, as if waiting for them to shift. They didn't. After they ate a small breakfast of beans and bread, Ayanna asked the question that had been forming silently since she arrived. "Why you trust me in your home?" Her brow furrowed. "White men see Apache. They fear, they hate, they push away. Why not you?" Colt rested his hands on the table. He thought before speaking, not out of hesitation, but because truth deserved weight. I've seen enough lies out here, enough cruelty called law, enough hurt done in the name of land or order. His jaw tightened. Man doesn't deserve respect because he wears a coat or badge. Earn it by how he treats people. You came here half dead. I wasn't going to step over you and keep writing. Ayanna held his gaze. There was no romantic softness in her eyes, only understanding and a kind of gratitude that didn't need big gestures. Many would still leave, she whispered. They're not me. Her lip trembled once, quickly controlled. She looked at her hands, steadying her breath. I'm not used to someone choosing to help. Many take, few give. Colt didn't comment. He wasn't good with sympathy. Instead, he stood and took a coat from the peg. It was old but thick. He set it near her quietly. When you feel strong enough, that'll keep the cold off better than my shirt. She reached for it, fingers brushing the wool, almost reverent. Thank you, she said. Not forced. Earned. He nodded once and stepped outside to gather wood. Ayanna watched him go, then slipped the coat around her shoulders. It smelled like smoke and pine and something solid she couldn't place. Safety, maybe. It hung heavy but warm. She touched the sleeve, grounding herself. Outside, Colt scanned the land again. The lone horse track still bothered him. He knelt, brushing snow aside with his glove, studying the depth, shape, direction. Someone riding light, not hauling supplies. Not neighbor, not ranch hand. Someone scouting or passing fast. He stood slowly, thoughts hardening. He'd need to move cattle closer soon. Keep the horse sheltered, make sure tools were inside. Winter danger came in more forms than cold. Inside, Ayanna tested her steps again. She walked slowly across the cabin, stiff but upright, each step more sure than the last. When Colt returned with wood, he stopped in the doorway, watching her without comment. When she noticed him, she straightened, chin slightly lifted as if to prove she stood on her own. You're pushing yourself fast, he said. Life pushed faster, she replied, breath short but steady. He didn't argue. Instead, he pointed toward the table. Sit. I'll show you something. She sat, confused. He reached into an old drawer and pulled out a small book, worn cover, pages slightly yellowed. She stared, curious. This not soldier book? No, his voice shifted slightly, a hint of discomfort. It's a family manual. Found it years back, tucked in a wagon I repaired for a settler passing through town. Ayanna blinked, uncertain why he showed it. Then he opened it to a page. Illustrations. Man and woman close, lips touching. She stared, surprised. She traced one image with her finger, slow, confused, fascinated. This is how you make babies, she whispered, eyes wide, voice innocent and raw. Cole froze, caught off guard. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Heat climbed into his neck. He leaned back in his chair, searching for steady words. That's one way affection starts, he said carefully. Not always about babies. Ayanna's brow furrowed deeper. White people way is lips together. Colt let out a slow breath through his nose. Sometimes, when two people trust each other, when they care. She studied the picture again, not laughing, not embarrassed, just absorbing a world she had never been shown. In my tribe, closeness different. Touch hands. Sit together. Share breath near fire. Quiet and long. She lifted her eyes. This way looks strange, but gentle. It can be. His voice softened without him meaning it to. Ayanna nodded slowly. I learn, not to do now, but to understand world. Her honesty hit harder than questions. She wasn't flirting. She wasn't trying to step past what was safe. She was learning how people lived here, so she could belong somewhere again. Colt swallowed once, clearing his throat. No rush in understanding. You rest first. Learn later. Ayanna closed the book gently, hands respectful on the worn cover. If soldiers not come soon, she murmured, maybe there is time to learn many things. Colt met her eyes. He didn't promise anything out loud, but his look said enough. If time allowed, he would teach her everything she wished to know. Not because she owed him anything, but because she deserved to understand the world she had been forced into. Outside, wind picked up again, rattling the cabin walls. Inside, warmth held. Two people sitting at a table, learning each other and the strange new shape their shared life was taking. Slow, cautious, and real. Ayana rested the coat around her shoulders and whispered, "I think I live here now." Colt didn't move, didn't change expression, but something settled quietly in him like earth accepting a seed. "You do," he said, "and no one will take you from here." Snow cracked under Colt's boots as he stepped out to gather kindling that afternoon. The sky muted and gray like winter was holding its breath. He moved slow, scanning the tree line first, then the ridge. Ever since he'd spotted tracks on the south side, he checked the land twice as often. Ayana's presence changed what danger meant. Before, risk only threatened him. Now he carried someone else's safety too. That felt heavy in his chest, not in a crushing way, but in a way that made every movement deliberate. Inside, Ayana folded Colt's coat and hung it neatly on the peg beside the door, her fingers careful, almost ceremonial. She wanted to honor anything that held warmth and protection. She shook out the repaired dress once, smoothing the leather with slow palms. Pride glinted in her eyes. She had fixed something broken. She was slowly stitching her life back together the same way. Still, her legs trembled when she stood too long. She accepted it without shame now, pressing a hand to the table and breathing slow. Healing wasn't weakness. It was work. Cole came back in with a small armful of wood, knocking snow off before laying it by the stove. She turned toward him, steadying herself. "You see more tracks?" she asked quietly. No, he shut the door firmly. But quiet land don't last long. She tilted her head, studying him. "You worry for me." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he set the logs down, rolled his shoulders as if loosening tension that lived in there permanently. Then he faced her. "I worry for what follows pain," he said, plain and honest. "Men don't run horses across frozen land unless they're looking for something." Ayana nodded slowly. "If they find me," she began, but Colt cut her off. "They won't." Not angry, not desperate, just sure. Ayana lowered her gaze. "In my people, woman not hide forever. Woman help fight." She paused, fingers curling slightly. "I'm not coward. I am tired." "Being tired ain't shame," Colt replied. "Rest don't make you weak. It keeps you alive." He poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. She accepted it without argument. Even her stubbornness learned pacing now. "You say woman fight," Colt added after a moment. "I don't doubt that. I've seen Apache stand their ground like no one else on earth." She blinked, surprised by the respect in his tone. Most white men spoke of her people as shadows, enemies, animals. Not him. "You see my people before," she said carefully. "In war." "Yes." His voice dropped. "Too many times." She waited for the next words, expecting judgment or guilt or blame. What came instead surprised her. Not every man that followed orders believed in what he was told. Quiet fell between them. Real quiet. Not awkward. Weighted with shared history neither asked for. Ayana leaned on the table for support, then slowly pushed herself upright. She took 2 steps without holding anything. Her knees shook, but she didn't fall. Colt watched her, jaw tight, ready to move if she swayed. She made it to the stove, bracing her hand lightly on the edge. "See?" she whispered, breath unsteady. "I still walk." He tried not to show pride on his face, but it was there, subtle in his eyes. "Yeah," he murmured. "You do." She stayed there a moment, catching her breath, then looked toward the window. Snow drifted slow outside, and the sky had a faint orange tint near the horizon.